Joining me in the studio now, Talk TV's chief political commentator Peter Cardwell and Rachael Henry from Tax Justice UK. Good to see you both. Thank you for being here. Peter, give us a kind of political overview. We know that during the budget itself, Mrs Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I should say, to give her due precedence and reverence, had cause to rebuke particularly the Labour Party for barracking and yelling, screaming, all kinds of heckling was going on. It was a particularly kind of hostile environment, wasn't it? And so explain why and also what the reaction has been since.
And somewhat ironically, Prime Minister's questions, where there was a lot of very solemn talk about certainly Wayne Couzens and Sarah Everard and the horrendous events around there. That was actually quite a solemn, sombre tone. And then suddenly it got very barracking, as you say, shouting, sniping. Dame Eleanor Lang, the Deputy Speaker, who always looks after the budget because she's the chairwoman of Ways and Means. It's an old parliamentary tradition. She had to tell people to sit down and be quiet for a while. Now, Jeremy Hunt certainly made it political as well. He gave a lot of stick to various people. Certainly, there were jibes about Angela Rayner's capital gains tax. There were talk about Keir Starmer being too fat, although Lord Mandelson, in fairness, had brought that up in the first place. So there were a number of ways in which this was very political, not just in terms of the style, but also the substance. We had clear pre-election giveaways and a lot of front-loading is the word they use in the Treasury, where you put in the good stuff first and then you pay for it later on. Now, there's a plan to pay down the debt. That's part of one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. That was a big part of today, and also the 2% percentage point reduction in national insurance, which also happened in the autumn. So Jeremy Hunt saying, look, most people, if you earn £35,000 a year, which is the average salary in this country or thereabouts, you'll be £900 a year better off if you combine those two. But there will, of course, the devil will be in the detail. And the problem is, in 2 or 3 days' time, does this all fall apart? But so far, no massive dramas, generally fairly straightforward.
All right, let's bring Rachael into the conversation from Tax Justice UK. Obviously, the Tories billing themselves as the tax-cutting party, the Tory low-tax party. But what do you see inside this budget? And also, I suppose you could say, the 14 years that got us here in the first place.
Look, I agree with what Peter said. I think, you know, in some ways, one of the striking things about this budget and the last budget is that the Chancellor is really prioritising short-term tax giveaways, which we know are basically bribes to the electorate. And that is going to be paid for by deep public spending cuts in the future. Right. You know, this is not economically credible by any measure. All mainstream economists and think tanks have basically said that this is not feasible. And ordinary people don't need economists to tell them that. They can't get GP appointments, they can't get dentist appointments, councils are going bankrupt, potholes litter the road. So I don't think he really addressed the elephant in the room. He's just left that for another day. And I think actually these tax cuts, they're really going to amount to very little for people on low incomes. It's going to be about £8 a week for the average worker. So I don't think it saved them last time, and I don't think it's going to save them this time. There was no bump in the polls, and I can't see that there will be particularly again.
Peter, on many occasions, we've discussed whether the Tories have their finger on the pulse, whether they've taken the temperature correctly, and whether they really know what the country cares about. We had Rishi's big 5 pledges, and you get rid of me if I don't deliver on them. Stop the small boats was the really big one. The reason I'm saying this is because today, in our programme on the budget, first of all, Nick Ellaby, our reporter, was standing in the market in Bury. He speaks to a delightful market stallholder, really upbeat, great guest, fabulous guest. And she says, you know, we need this, we need this, we need this. Potholes, she says. Potholes, you know, with terrible potholes all round Bury. Nobody wants it like that. Everybody wants them repaired. Then we have Rachael sitting here. What does she say? Potholes, she says. What about potholes? So you wonder whether the government has taken its eye off the ball and looked too far above the potholes to huge issues which actually people aren't that concerned about. Let me ask Peter that first, and then I'll ask you, Rachael, what.
And these are pretty basic things. We just want roads that you are not going to harm your car. You want to get a GP's appointment. You want to get your kid into the local school. You want to be able to buy a house and not have no money left at the end of the month. These are basic things. Now, there were some surveys done recently. I'd be very interested to hear Rachel's view on it, actually, where about 70% of people said they're happy with the level of taxation that is there at the moment and they don't want that to reduce. But I think behind that, if you look into that a little bit more, and Rachael will correct me, most people just want value for money for services. They perhaps don't mind paying high taxes, although I do. But in terms of the level of value for money they're getting, and also whether so many councils that are going bankrupt all over the country, are they going to just raise council tax? So anything that you're sort of given essentially from central government is going to be taken away by local government. These are big problems and they're going to continue, and they're not going to get those potholes fixed.
Rachel?
Look, I agree. I think, poll after poll says that people don't want tax cuts. They want investment in public services. People aren't stupid. They know that tax cuts will be paid for by public spending cuts. And actually, that's what affects people's lives more. If people can't get a dentist appointment, they're going to have to pay out for that themselves. That's going to be more than £8 a week that they might get back from a paltry tax giveaway. So I think people have a real belief in public services. They want them to be repaired. That's massively impacting their lives. They don't think these tax cuts are actually going to amount to that much. What I'm really struck by is that the government seems to have gone into this bunker mentality. It doesn't seem to be listening to what people actually want.
I think that's an excellent phrase, and that really is the phrase I was searching for. Absolutely what I meant to say, quite right. A bunker mentality, where they're focusing on these kind of bigger picture issues, which are very vague anyway. No one can really completely understand what they mean by them. I mean, predictions about the economy, you never know whether you can really believe it, what it really means and what it amounts to anyhow. And as you say, focusing on these particular issues as if there aren't terrible problems with councils going bust and people feeling that they're not getting exactly what they want. I mean, that's why Jasmine Birtles, Peter, was talking about, library closures, swimming pool closures.
Social care.
Social care, exactly.
And this is a massive issue. And it's natural for a government to go into a bunker mentality when it is having so many problems in the polls. But the question is, people don't really care if Rishi Sunak is a multi-millionaire with 400 million quid in the bank or whatever. What they do care is, does he relate? Does he connect? Does he understand normal people? And can he see the problems that many, many people are having in this country at the moment? And Labour, which is riding high in the polls, can connect in a way. Perhaps not Keir Starmer, maybe not the most charismatic person, but certainly people see, look, if he was Prime Minister, they could live with that. If someone like Rachael Reeves was Chancellor, yeah, they'd trust her, first female Chancellor, about time. And I think there are a lot of... It's interesting in that you can kind of relax. You saw that interview with Jonathan Reynolds earlier. He was totally relaxed. He was totally fine, attacking the Tories. Everything's fine. We have a plan. It's all going to be fine. We'll give you more detail. Whereas when you interview Conservative ministers, as we both do, it's much more a sense of, well, it's fine and we're doing this and this, and they're a bit more nervous. So really the tone of a lot of what Jeremy Hunt was saying was a bit nervous. They know they're going into a really tough election. The timing will be fascinating in that regard. The big gamble has always been the economy. And the fact is that is just not paying off at the moment for the Conservatives.
And Rachel, though, we are in this situation, which everyone can describe in their own way, but a situation where we're being told all the time that the really key parts of this country are broken. An NHS, you've just said you can't get an appointment to see a GP, you can't get an appointment with a dentist. There are no dentists in vast swathes of the country. We know that, 7.6 million people on an NHS waiting list can't get an operation, probably in pain. Certainly their lives are affected by this. It's an appalling state of affairs. Prisons that are overcrowded, cases that come to nothing, police forces that we constantly hear are riddled with corruption, people don't trust them, and on I can go. All the different things that together, add up to a country that seems to be in a crumbling and very difficult state.
Broken Britain.
Yeah, broken Britain, in which people are really struggling just to do the things that we used to consider fairly normal, like just to feed their families or just to pay their rent or mortgages, just the normal stuff. No one's asking for anything glamorous, just ordinary life. Incredibly, incredibly difficult. So here's my question. Labour, as you said, Jonathan, looking relaxed there, pretty cool. We see what the polls are saying. Do you think, Rachel, there's a chance that with the inheritance that they will get, Labour will be able to improve matters at all? Or will they be handed a chalice so riddled with poison, a country so badly broken, that they won't be able to do anything even if they have the best intentions and good policies?
I think the fundamentals are going to be the same for any incoming government. All of those things that you list basically speak to the sense of decay in the UK. And I think what's really interesting is we've got to a point where a fundamental precondition for fixing the economy and achieving growth is going to be sorting out public services. The IMF has said that if the UK does not sort out health, skills and make plans to transition to net zero, we will not grow and we will not sort the economy out. So Labour are banking a lot of their plans on growth. The thing that I think Labour have been quite short-sighted about is they seem to be sort of backing themselves into a corner on that. They are going to have to invest to grow. One thing that I really welcomed today in the Chancellor's statement was, and it was also a very politically savvy move because it's put Labour in a bit of a corner, but he's stolen sort of, you know, Labour's non-doms policy, and he's also stolen their extension of the windfall tax. I think that's a real indication that policies where you're expecting people with the broader shoulders to pay more is really what is left. You know, working people's taxes have gone up. And I think there's a real sense that rich people don't pay their fair share in this country. And considering the, you know, raft of issues that we face, the level of investment that it is going to take to get out of this hole, we are going to have to probably ask people with the broader shoulders to pay more.
I just don't know whether the sums stack up, Peter. The mathematics works on this. There are so few of the rich people that you're talking about. The idea that, you know, it's fewer than 1% of people earning over a certain amount of money in this country will be able to broaden their shoulders to such an inordinate degree that they'll be able to support the entire rest of the country on the basis of the tax they pay. I don't know if that if that adds up, if that makes any kind of fiscal sense at all, whether there are enough of them to redress the financial balance.
Well, I'm not an economist, but perhaps Rachael is.
So, yeah. At Tax Justice UK, we've done modelling, and if you brought in just 6 taxes, so it would be 1 new tax, 5 tweaks to existing taxes, you could raise 50 billion a year.
What would the new tweaks be?
So tweaks would be like tweaks to capital gains tax. It was including the non-doms tax, close down some loopholes in inheritance
with the non-doms tax today?
Yes, yeah. I think that's an essential thing that any government should do.
Although he has said that you can live here for 4 years and not pay any tax.
Look, I think it's fair enough.
And don't you think non-doms will just fly in for 4 years and on day whatever of the final year disappear, won't they?
The last changes to non-doms, 100 left of 68,000. So I think that is normally scaremongering that is overblown. And I think we're now in a really different context. Like, you know, we're not in 1997 or something like that. We can't expect magical growth. And we've run out of rope in terms of a lot of other tax increases. I do think we are going to have to look to new taxes and existing and looking to fix some of the existing taxes that are completely dysfunctional.
Tell me what kind of income level you're talking about. Who are the people who you think ought to broaden their shoulders? What kind of amount of money? And Peter said the average salary in this country, 35,000 approximately. Yeah. So what are you talking about?
Exactly. So the tax that we would advocate for would only be asking for more from people with over 10 million in assets. So that is 20,000 people in the UK. That is 0.04% of the population. And that tax alone, if you levied 2% a year on people with over 10 million assets, would raise 22 billion a year.
Right. I mean, that calls to mind, though, doesn't it? Ed Miliband's wealth tax, where people are taxed on the money that they already have or the houses they already live in. Because when you say assets, that might be a house bought long ago for a small amount of money in which the family still lives. And they will say, well, we're cash poor. This is our home. We can't just sell it and pay. You know, we can't afford to stay in our own home if we have to keep paying on our assets. So that's going to be always a very difficult one. And it was even unpopular in those days. People called it, didn't it, the politics of spite and envy. They didn't like it. Even, you know, really dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters didn't much like it.
I totally take the point, and that has been a big objection to wealth taxes in the past. That is why I think it's so important to set it at quite a high threshold. So people with 10 million assets, over 10 million in assets, have a diversity of assets. It's very rarely just a home. It normally includes pensions, share portfolios, possessions, and all of that. So it means that it's practical for HMRC to actually administer, and also some of the failures that have happened in international wealth taxes. For example, France is sometimes cited as a concern. They set theirs at a much lower rate. It was at 1.3 million. So if you set it at a higher rate, it's a very few amount of people. That could really contribute to fixing some of the long-term problems. And I think that is where an incoming government is going to have to be looking, because you do realistically have working people paying more already. So I think, wealth taxes and sort of, tweaks to existing, wealth taxes is sensible and credible, and also vastly popular. People, in 70 to 80%, across polls that are done all the time, are really massively in favour of this. So I think it is interesting that a Conservative Chancellor is even looking to policies that probably, 5-10 years ago, the non-Doms, they never would have, thought of doing. It shows that they're the options available and they're very popular.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you both. Coming up after the break,